Hello, hello. Okay, we do appear to be working now. I appear to be the only one here. And I have a significant lag. Crap. All right, let's see if we can make this work.
There we go.
There we go.
Alrighty. There we go.
There we go.
All right, I'm gonna. Alrighty. Okay, and
There we go.
well, I guess I have to leave.
There
we go. Okay, I'm gonna close that tab to minimize echo. And
so I'm on, but I've got a bit of a lag. So apologies in advance. Or actually, are you hearing me just fine?
Yes.
Okay, that must have just been the lag on the YouTube site. So you're here, and I know that Ernst and Joshua were there, but I'm not seeing them here yet. So we shall see. I apologize for the technical difficulties.
No, it's okay. Every teleconference goes badly the first couple times.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay, seriously, where are these guys?
Yeah, it's totally a thing. It's a time-honored tradition.
Huh. All right, let's see here. You got here by using the link I posted in the on the YouTube page?
It did, yes. And I also installed the Chromium plugin for Google Hangouts from the store.
That's the difficulty they may be having.
Okay, I don't know what browsers they're using. I know that there's a Hangouts plugin for Firefox, which should work with...
Yeah, I'm using Firefox, so...
Okay.
Yeah, we are live on air. 2 watching now. Let me check in with these guys. Okay, I'm seeing Josh is writing that he's at work and can't join in, and saying that we should just go ahead and the 2 of us will talk.
Sure.
So what I've just done, I've got the YouTube page up right now. So Ernst, Josh, if you guys have questions, and we can just go from there. And Bryce and I will do all the talking. So apologies, you have to listen to me talk more than I thought we'd have to. So we'll go ahead and just get this going. Thank you for all of us for coming. So my name is Matt. If we're doing the whole ARG thing, then you can call me Monk, but Matt works just as fine well. So I wanted to thank Bryce for coming by to give us a little chat today on a topic that I know that he has been working on for quite a while, and which is of interest to both myself and the rest of everybody here, which is the topic of exocortices. So without further ado, Bryce, why don't you just give us a short little intro about who you are, what you do, and then we'll kind of...
Okay. Well, my name is Bryce Alexander Lynch. I've been affiliated with the Zero State since about 2011. I was active on the Google group a long time ago. I've been active in the hacker community since about 1992. I've been doing information security professionally since 1994, 1995. I started building my Exocortex in 1997.
Way back when. Wow.
Yeah. So basically,
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. So basically, I fell prey to the common syndrome of the time, which is I grew up on dial-up and then went away to college and discovered Ethernet. And all the information, all of it. And at the time, there were too many news sites and other things to keep track of. Slashdot had just become a thing. Fresh Meat had just become a thing. And as my starting to learn, programming language X project, I started writing these pieces of software that would wake up and run every hour, every 2 hours or so. And this was before Atom and RSS. And they would load a URL and download the page and then diff it to see if any new articles had been posted. And then if new articles had been posted, they'd grab the article and render it to HTML. I was using links at the time. You can use links-dump, and it'll take HTML and turn it to regular text. So I wasn't writing a parser or anything like that. And I grabbed the resulting text for certain keywords. At the time, I was looking for things like, kernel bug and, new version of Slackware coming out, new packages for Debian, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it would compile a précis. So I'd wake up in the morning, come back from class and while I was eating lunch in my room, I'd be going through my news précis and checking my email and stuff like that. And then I'd leave for class again, or come back, read my news précis again, check my email, study, rinse, repeat for 4 years. And somewhere in there, I started running a moo. I don't know if anybody remembers MUDs, multi-user dungeons, but a moo is basically MUD object-oriented.
Yeah, very, very vaguely do I recall those.
Okay, so basically it's a piece of software that runs on a server. You telnet to it, you log in, and it implements something very much like interactive fiction, a text-based game. And they were a very popular means of online gaming and socialization back in the 90s. I ran one based upon the Lambda Moo software. Because it had this expansive object-oriented that is reminiscent in some ways of Smalltalk. So of course I started building stuff, and my friends got on, and we'd hang out there and stuff like that. And I started building bots, things that would a bit more complex than NPCs, but not as complex as I think of them sort of like too many bosses. And I then got the idea, hey, maybe I can start combining these things. Started building search bots and no bots that would basically crawl around the internet looking for interesting pieces of information. And as a way of learning how to use databases, would push it to a MySQL database, would push it to a Postgres database. And I started building this hive of bots running around to do stuff, running around doing stuff. And basically, I was using these bots to do stuff for me. Pull my email, search my email. There was a bot that I trained specifically on death threats and throws the messages into a klame folder and stuff like that.
Out of curiosity, did you get many?
Yeah, I get 8 or 9 a week.
Oh my goodness. Sorry. I apologize there a little bit. Very sorry to hear that. Good. Continue.
And sometime in 1999, I was taking a class in artificial intelligence in undergrad, and was introduced to the wonderful world of ELIZA. and Julia and chatterbots of those sorts. And I sort of had a revelation. My professor in AI did an experiment where he set up an IRC server and a couple of the chatterbots at the time. And basically, he demonstrated the Turing test by picking students out of the class. And I was one of the students he picked. And basically, we did the Turing test where I was one of the people talking, and then there was a construct talking. And you chat with both, and you which was the construct and which was the human. And long story short, I lost. And everyone kept, and I had a revelation. I was like, wait a minute. Software is a better person than I am. And this gave me the idea to start using, because of that phenomenon, this gave me the idea to start using software to automate certain parts of my life that were important, to be sure, but went way beyond information gathering or anything like that, and actually expanding what I was capable of.
So could you give us a couple of examples of that? Seems like a good place as any to start talking about some of that stuff.
So it sort of grew out of my style. For a while, I went into system administration purely, and not so much information security. And I started, and as a sysadmin, you automate the hell out of everything you possibly can to make your life easier.
Makes sense.
So I started writing really smart automation software that would take care of servers, monitor patch levels, do statistical analysis of system activity, and basically sort of do sysadmin in a box stuff and only page me when things got too messed up, like the kernel message buffer was, packing in log lines faster than it can manage, or, sign flood coming in, port scan coming in, stuff like that. Basically, I was really, really bored for a couple of years because my bots were doing all the work for me.
Good problem to have.
Yeah. At one point, I think I mentioned this on Facebook a couple years ago. My boss at the company I was working for at the time called me into his office and was basically dressing me down for goofing off on Slack all the time. And I said, well, why don't you yell at me on Slack about goofing off? Mm-hmm. And as it turned out, he was yelling at a construct of myself that I'd written. I wound up leaving that job not too long after that. That was kind of worried him.
That seems like something he should be praising you for. I mean, you were able to, automate wasting time at work, so you can actually get stuff done. But
he didn't. He wasn't.
He didn't see it that way. Well, to each their own, I guess. Okay, so you. Oh, go ahead.
Well, he brought up a valid point, which is, in interpersonal reaction, are you talking to the person or are you talking to the software? And the question that he brought up was, one of the questions he brought up was, do you think so little of interacting with me that you would delegate, coffee maker talk to a piece of software while you go off and do something else?
That's an interesting point. I can sort of see where he's coming at. Less of an efficiency question and more of a, as you say, a kind of social interaction question, which is more important. He went on the latter, it would seem.
And I can see his point of view. If someone wants to talk to someone, they're going to want to talk to someone. There's the whole human connection thing. On the other hand, I didn't really like talking to him, so that's sort of why.
That would make sense, yes. And yeah, it, depending on the level of interaction you're talking about, I suppose, a bot may be useful for one option, for one situation, and not for another. Though with, I guess, chatbots getting more and more advanced, who knows? Perhaps they will start invading the social interaction side of things as well.
They already have.
And I'm sure that, I don't know about you, I don't know about me, many people that gives them a reaction much like your boss had. Am I talking to you or am I talking to a bot? And as these things get better and better, what's the difference?
Mm-hmm. Especially when you take into account what the bot's corpus is trained on. So
yeah, is it? Actually, expand on that point, if you could.
Okay, so a lot of chatterbots these days are based upon corpuses that are basically, so there's a line of input, or there are multiple lines of input, which mean roughly the same thing. And then there's a small number of outputs or other functions get called that respond to them. There's lots of different natural language processing techniques you can use to figure out what the person talking to your construct is saying and how you want the construct to respond. One of them is called the Levenstein distance, where basically you calculate how much text the input has in common with the strings of text in the bot's corpus that mean a certain thing. It's like, so if they mention like airline flight and price and time, well then they probably want to book a flight. So this is the part of the bot's internal structure you want to call out to say, oh, okay, yes, you want to book a flight. Where do you want to go to? Where are you flying out of? Yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
The other way of coming at it is, and this is for the more general purpose chatterbots and AI bots. I train mine off of the text I post to my blog and the text I post to my old live journal and my email archive, which I've been maintaining since about 1993. So there's an incredible amount of stuff that I've written over that time that is in these bots databases that dictates more or less how the bot responds.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings up a whole bunch of other questions like, well, okay, was anything I wrote in any of these emails sensitive or personal? Do I not want it coming out in a discussion with someone else at some point in the future because some statistical quirk dictated that, this comment with my ex-girlfriend from 21 years ago is the best fit for this conversation, and that's a perfectly valid point. There
Yes.
are privacy and confidentiality that do have to be considered, and probably the best way of managing those concerns is, as with any system you build, a lot of the process of data cleaning is manual, so you have to sit there and go through it and correct spelling if that's something you're concerned about, and punctuation and line breaks, and occasionally deleting stuff that you really don't want potentially coming out in a conversation later.
So, if I may ask you, so you've got this bot that you've trained more or less on you. You've trained it on your previous communications with people. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
So, if you allow me to ask a bit of a philosophical question, if I talk to that bot, am I talking to you? Am I talking to an extension of you? Am I just talking to a thing that is like you? Or what's your view on that?
I would consider it an extension of me, just because it's letting me offload some of the processing overhead of social interaction when I cannot spare it. And that usually translates to I'm at work doing stuff. I can't take the time out to chat.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of, career stuff.
Okay, so a part of you, but not you per se. And I know that gets into a bunch of questions of identity and probably stuff that's way above my pay grade, but it does seem to be a natural something that has to be considered when discussing these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So Josh has just written, if we haven't seen it, there is a Black Mirror episode that's an excellent exploration of this question. And I haven't actually watched Black Mirror. I should probably do that at some point.
Yeah, I haven't either.
So where was I going? I had a question. Thank you, Josh. You've interrupted my thought process. It had to do. So it had to do with bots and chatbot interactions, and I've lost the train of thought, and perhaps it will come back to me. So let's move on, and perhaps it'll circle back around. But so I know you've talked about some of the developments of it, and I know that just because I've interacted with you, some of the you have in recent years reconfigured your Exocortex using new technology, programs like Hugin, and I guess we can just start, since I know not everybody here is totally familiar with that. Just a short little talk on just what that is and technologies that you utilize or Exocortex. What is the? I guess I'm asking, what is the structure of your Exocortex these days? What is it built out of? Let's start there.
Okay, so it is built out of a group of servers running in hosting providers around the world. I've gone for geographical distribution that are running some combination of instances of Hugin, which I'll touch on in a minute. Federated XMPP servers, XMPP to REST API bridges, and specialized bots that take orders and return outputs via REST APIs, but are tailored for long-running jobs that Hugin processes are not.
Okay.
So Hugin has the idea of an agent, which is a piece of code, and it's an object-oriented system. So there is a file for the Twitter timeline. There's a file to make HTTP requests. There's a file which, when instantiated, listens for webhooks, stuff like that. And then there's the idea that you write a relatively small configuration for it, 5 or 10 lines of JSON document that basically say you're going to contact this this URL. What you're going to get out of it is HTML. You're going to parse that HTML and look for the following CSS selectors into a small JSON document, and then send them to another agent for processing a response or something like that. And it's very good for go out and do this thing, get the result, process it, pass it somewhere else, and then maybe at the end package it up and do something with it, or just act on the final result of that computation, and then wait to be pinged by the scheduler again. It's an inherently multi-process system. There's a bunch of different processing engines behind it. There's one that uses multi-threading. There's one which is called the DJ, the distributed job handler, which basically you can stand up as many as you have CPUs, and they just all run simultaneously using traditional multi-processing techniques rather than multi-threaded programming techniques. And basically, I have those agents running around doing stuff for me, looking at the stock market, looking at cryptocurrency markets, data mining, social networks, doing some secretarial work for me, doing some alerting, logging into other services to do things like stock trades, cryptocurrency trades. My lawyer's going to yell at me for talking about that. Well, there's that whole issue of, are you giving advice when you are not explicitly licensed to give that kind of advice? And I'm not a professional stock trader. I'm not a professional broker. So that's a really iffy thing. And
so that does actually, I remember what it was I was thinking about earlier. I was going to ask you, you're obviously comfortable with your bots and your Exocortex making decisions for you. I was wondering if there is, how comfortable are you with that? Is there a line past which you don't want to cross? You want to say, no, I want to keep this decision-making activity for this issue purely in my head. I don't want, a bot making that decision for me. Or is there any, maybe not practically, but even hypothetically, is there a point where you're like, I'm not sure I really want to do that?
Personal scheduling is one of them.
Really?
Yeah.
That
Because
would seem to be more mundane.
I have a family, and I have some very close friends.
Mhm.
They mean enough to me that I want to make those decisions myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't as much as one of those servers is a part of my cognitive ability, reserve the right to tell Lissa, yeah, let's have a date tonight.
Kind of getting back to what we were talking about with your boss earlier, how comfortable people are talking to a bot if it's not a human, because of the social interaction aspect, the aspect of actually connecting with somebody.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've also, and this came up some years ago, and this is what put that phenomenon on my radar. The people that I'm close to have asked specifically to, if I want to chat, I have to chat.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell my best friend or my wife, like, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot let some other aspect of myself do the work of interacting and bonding with my wife or my best friend or anything like that, because that causes some, well, first of all, it's seen as rude. And putting myself in someone else's shoes and thinking about it, yes, in some ways it is rude. And these are people that I really care about. So the agreement that I have made with them is I am not going to fob off hanging out with you on one of my constructs. But if something happens to me, keep in mind, one of them may contact you.
Okay. So kind of a security or emergency measure.
Yeah. Yeah, so in 2017, I spent some time in the hospital and some time in medical care, and it wound up being some of my exocortex contacting people to get help that wound up coming into play.
And how did they feel about that? Was that something you had discussed beforehand? Or?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was also because the emergency room didn't bother looking in my wallet for contact information. It was the fact that I got nothing. Anyway, it was the fact that it was a combination of factors that led Crash Cart to consider the possibility that I was either sick or incapacitated and make the necessary phone calls.
So Josh has been writing a couple of things, and I apologize, Josh. It's taken me a second to get to this. He notes that on the topic we've just been talking about, if you delegate these interactions, then you are losing out on the possibility of having that interaction with somebody else. Is on what you're talking about on the importance of actually doing that face to face. He also had a question earlier in regards to stock trading.
Mm-hmm.
You aren't expressly giving us strategies, so I think you're okay.
Okay.
Following up on that, I'm not a lawyer, so I'll take the word on that. But he had a question in regards to financial transactions done by your bots. Do you have cutoff amounts for the amount you want to use or lose when you're doing trading?
I do. So for trading things like Bitcoin and Litecoin, my cutoff is there's always going to be at least 1 unit of X remaining at the end of it. And there is also there's trend analysis for, it's like when Bitcoin hit $19,000 and change in December.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, it was a protracted, long, steady growth curve, followed by a plateau.
Mm-hmm.
and basically the bots did statistical analysis. Okay, this is a huge growth curve. It's a steady growth curve. It's going to plateau at some point. So if the next 10 data points are within 2 standard deviations of one another, then we do a sell. So it's not too early. It's not too late. It's not too early. It can potentially be too late.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way that I would do it myself anyway. As for things like purchases, I have very few subscription purchases, and that's capped at $60 a month at 2 services. And I might cancel it, I might not. It's nice to have something to mess around with once in a while, but I'm also kind of so.
Fair enough. So, how are we doing? So I don't want. I know we all have stuff to do, so I won't run this too much longer. But I did want to touch on just your view of the future of this kind of technology. So you're obviously kind of on the cutting edge of this, but where do you see this kind of or where would you like to see technologies that could be built into an exocortices go? What has you excited? What do you think is likely to happen in the near future, midterm, so forth?
Near future, I think it's going to be a really niche thing. I haven't really met anyone else that's doing this sort of thing. I've been looking for them.
I think you may have found them. So
fantastic. In the medium term, I think it's going to be largely a professional kind of thing. We're seeing things like X.AI, which is basically automated machine learning driven scheduling, which uses the Google Calendar API. And I hope whoever's writing those interfaces is getting paid well, because that's a terrible API. We're going to start seeing more and more of it for personal trading. We're definitely seeing something like that at cryptocurrency exchanges like Bitstamp. We'll probably start seeing it at stock brokerages like E-Trade, where basically you can define sets of logic with arbitrary complexity that basically manage your trades for you. That's certainly going to be part of an Exocortex yourself, but it's still something you're interfacing with. Something that I've been working on and have had some success with is as personal assistants for people that have had brain surgery or head trauma.
Oh, interesting.
So I've had quite a few head injuries over the years. And one of the things that happens is your short-term memory gets blanked. Your long-term memory gets a little bit messed up because the insults to the brain that come from head trauma can be subtle. And the brain's reaction seems to be to not encode those memories in the long term clearly. And unfortunately, because memory seems to be holographic in the human brain, it can also impact other things, like the ability to maintain your personal schedule or your ability to maintain lists in your head, stuff like that. It's really arcane and wiggy and difficult to manage. So I've been doing some research into software agents that can make up deficits until the organics have healed sufficiently to take over. And the problem there has been the user interface primarily. I do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, how do these people actually interact with the agents?
And I admit that my preferred user interface, which is text, is suboptimal for a lot of people.
Would the solution then, is it what you're getting at, a voice interaction of some kind? Or some kind of direct brain for talking more long future?
For the medium term, I'm thinking speech recognition with natural language processing. Alexa's getting big, Cortana's getting big. One of the reasons that I backed the Mycroft project on GoFundMe is because it's an open source speech recognition personal assistant, which is designed to be extensible and designed to have an API that somebody can interact with. So I've been trying to teach myself enough about the fields of natural language processing that I can basically start experimenting with that as the user interface. And because it's Mycroft, because it's on GitHub, the barrier to entry is very low for people that need it. You check it out, you run a shell script that starts up. Alexa is, in fact, coming down in price. Not everybody is in a position to buy it. I know that last December, I certainly wasn't able to.
Yeah.
So low barrier
There
to
is
entry.
Sorry, continue.
To entry, low cost, extensibility, speed of deployment, and ideally simplicity of deployment also, so that somebody could stand up the infrastructure and immediately get some benefit out of it without having to read a thick manual or hire a specialist or anything like that. Something that is theoretically as easy to use as all possible circumstances a web browser. Worst of all possible circumstances, an application like iMessage or Skype.
So a couple of questions. First of all, this idea, have you shopped this idea around to hospitals, to intensive care facilities, or people who maybe handle the more tech side of that things? Is there interest in this, in that field?
I mentioned it to my neurosurgeon. I mentioned it to the neurologist that I've been working with for the past couple of years. They've expressed interest in it. So far, it hasn't come to anything of that sort. It was more sort of, well, okay, you're talking about this really complex thing that I sort of understand, and I definitely understand this kind of jargon, so cognitively, we'd be doing pretty well. Anyone in working on it or contributing to it.
Okay. My other question, before I go on to my last question, just one thing. He agrees that the calendar API is really, really bad. So you're not alone in thinking that. And then one last thing I wanted to touch on. We mentioned, you talked about Alexa and how these digital assistants are getting more advanced and getting better at that. The fact that those are, and I think you might have been starting to touch on that, the fact that those are proprietary, that they are belong to a company, what are your views on, how am I going to try to say this? What are your views on exocortices technologies that aren't owned by the person using them? So as these assistants get more and more advanced and we are utilizing them more and more, if you're using Hugin or Mycroft or something like that, you control everything that this extension of yourself is doing. If you're using Alexa, you necessarily know what's going on under the hood. And I just want to get your opinions on, how do you feel about that as these become more and more prevalent?
I feel inherently mistrustful of them. Privacy is a big thing for me. And the fact that there is on one hand, to get that kind of capability, you're looking at very large data centers packed full of servers, huge teams of programmers constantly working on the software in the back end, constantly cleaning the data, constantly analyzing it, constantly improving it. And that is necessary to get it working at scale. That's necessary to turn it into a product. However, you're also putting a lot of potentially sensitive personal information in their hands. Not just your credit card number, not just, your purchase history, but those personal assistants by definition, have to listen all the time for the watchword that means everything after this word is a command. And usually it's like, hey Siri or Google or something like that. But that also means that these microphones are constantly listening. And a lot of people don't have any way of knowing if they're sending that information back to the mothership for analysis, or if the listen for the watchword processing is being done on the unit or not. Privacy and surveillance. The privacy and surveillance implications of this are somewhat frightening.
And going back to what we were saying earlier, if we are considering these technologies an extension of our brains, an extension of ourselves, at that point, you've essentially outsourced yourself to a company, which is terrifying all in its own right, and probably will be a Black Mirror episode at some point as well. But yes, so I would agree that the potential there is somewhat frightening.
We've already seen what happens in circumstances where services that we rely upon every day suddenly vanish, and how people react to it. Skype is the de facto standard for for managing teams at work these days. And when Slack goes down, people freak out. When AWS has an outage, all of a sudden sites that we don't even think about are inaccessible. Twitter goes offline. Parts of what's a service that people use these days? Snapchat is suddenly unavailable. So there's a cascade effect of the things that we don't even think about going down that cause other critical things to go offline. In something that has become more and more prevalent in emergencies like bad storms or crises or something, everybody tries to call somebody else on their cell phone and overload the cell towers, so nothing gets through except maybe one SMS in 10, stuff like that. We don't think about the our infrastructure to handle very large spikes in activity or dropouts of capacity.
So Josh had a couple of comments. FAMGA also owns all the data point. I'm not familiar with that acronym. Perhaps you are, or perhaps Josh could let us know what that means. And that Netflix is all AWS as well. So going back to this idea of just, being our own, which is a whole nother discussion and a worthy one, but definitely something that is important. So we are hitting right around the 45-minute mark. I apologize again for starting late. Thank you for everyone bearing with me there. And before we wrap this up, Josh, Ernst, if you have any questions you'd like to ask Bryce before we end this, go ahead and type them. And there may be a bit of a lag, so we'll give that a second. And if you guys don't want to say anything, please just let me know that. Say, all good or thanks for coming, like that. And while we're waiting for that, let me just preemptively say thank you very much for being willing to sacrifice a part of your morning for this chat. It's speaking only for myself, but I imagine the other guys agree. It's been a good time. Some good stuff, some good information, and as I mentioned, I think there might be a group here that is interested in working on this stuff. So perhaps something can grow out of this. And looks like we're all good. Ernst and Josh say they've both been enjoying it. No more chipping in. So with that, I will close this up. Thank you all very much for coming. And like I said, I look forward to moving forward with some of this stuff. This has been informative, and this has been a good time. So thank you all.
Thank you. I greatly enjoyed it.
Very good. All right. With that, I will sign off. Good morning or afternoon, as the case is, to all of you.
All right. Good afternoon.